All right, good morning, everybody. I would like to get started. I think we have the bulk of folks who signed up online. And so let's try out this new technology. So I wanted to welcome everybody to our first WMG seminar. In light of the COVID crisis, we're probably going to do this on a more regular basis, but I'm sure glad that everybody could join us. One of the things that we're going to do, I've got people muted just so that we don't have a lot of interference as we're doing the presentation and to preserve bandwidth. So if anybody has a question, there are two ways to ask those questions. One is in the chat feature. If you send a question to the lawyer who you want to ask the question to, or you can send it to Brittany Hodgkinson, who is our municipal point person, and she'll monitor those questions and alert us as they come in. So I want to sort of introduce the team at this point, so you know who they are, and also so that I know that they can hear me and I can hear them. So first I'll introduce Nuala Kenny. Nuala, are you there?
I am. Good morning.
Excellent. And then I'll introduce Mia Corella, because she's right below Nuala on my screen.
Hi, everyone.
And last but certainly not least, I'll introduce Tim Harmer of our office. Tim, can you hear us? He can hear us, but we can't hear him. I will unmute him now. That's probably better. Try that, Tim.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, thanks everyone, and look forward to the webinar. Nice to see everyone.
Okay, so we thought that as we're working remotely through this COVID crisis, and certainly we've been very busy and spoken to many of you who are on the line now. We wanted to initially just check in and make sure that everybody's okay, and at the same time let you know that we're available, we're continuing to work, and you can reach us by email or by our cell phone numbers. I had a card up at the beginning, hopefully you could see, and I'll put it up at the end as well. But don't hesitate to reach out to us. It's certainly been an interesting time, and we've been helping folks out all hours of the day, every day of the week. So when you have a problem, we're certainly there to help, whether it's a legal problem or you just want to talk about what's going on in the municipality to somebody who is not in the municipality. We're happy to be that shoulder to lean on. So one of the first things that I wanted to say in the opening is that although this is a time of crisis and the province has declared an emergency, it's really important for us as the municipal leaders not to panic, which is easy for me to say as all sorts of strange things are happening in our workforce, with our municipal taxes, with our economy, and then with our personal lives. But what we want to try to emphasize is it's time to take a breath. And if you have questions, reach out to us. It is interesting to see, and one of the things we're going to try to emphasize today are some of the recent changes that the provincial and federal government have put in place that affect us. They're certainly interested in what we have to say. I've spent a lot of time, and Nuala and I both have spent a lot of time with MPs, MPPs, dealing with folks at the Ombudsman's office and dealing with municipal affairs. And the one common thread now is that everybody's working hard to help us out. So I'm pleased to say that, and I'm pleased to tell you that I've certainly experienced that. We were on the phone with our MPPs and with the minister's office prior to the passing of the Municipal Emergency Act 2020, so they are listening to us. So what I want to get to now is just a bit of an overview about what we're going to talk about, the overall issues that we want to talk about. So first, Nuala is going to tell us about delegation of authority bylaws. We know that's something that that is on many people's minds, and we've seen some really good ideas and some other ideas that Nuala will warn you about. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Mia is going to talk about electronic participation in council meetings and ideas that we have with respect to that. That's going to lead into Tim talking about the provincial order with respect to gatherings of more than 5 people. And then at the end, Mia is going to talk about some reminders and ideas that we have for your municipality. So I'm just going to check the chat. I don't see any questions yet. Oops. So with that, I'm going to hand over the floor to Nuala, and she's going to talk about delegation of authority bylaws.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to speak to you this morning, but I want to say, really, we are just delighted that you are all healthy and safe and able to participate in this webinar that we're hosting. We do have an agenda, but the primary agenda was we wanted to check in. You're very, very valued clients of Wishart, and I worked a long time in the municipal field, and I know how taxing it is on all of you. I know the pressure you get from your council. I know the pressure you get from taxpayers. I know the criticisms that you are facing every single day. And all of us at WMG wanted to really thank you for your hard work in your communities in this very, very difficult time. There was never a question that municipalities would shut down. They're definitely essential. And it's a very unprecedented, unsettling time. And we do thank you so much for your hard work in your community. And again, we're delighted that you can participate today. So yes, we have an agenda, but feel free to veer off that agenda, because I think it's important. We all believe it's very important for us to communicate in these troubled waters. And this will be the first of many webinars. So if we don't get to an issue today, we certainly will in the very, very near future. So I wanted to speak a little bit about delegation of authority bylaws, because we saw municipalities, we were getting questions from municipalities, and they took sort of the same tone. And the tone was, we're in such a period of crisis. It would be great if I could just, as the mayor or as city council, if I could delegate the bulk of my authority down to staff. That way the wheels won't fall off the bus, which is a sensible idea. And I really am very much in favor of delegation of authority bylaws, but I want to caution you about some of the concerns we have going forward. And with everything that each of us says today, I want to reiterate something that the ministry has told us. Paul and I had a very good conversation with the ministry, and this is a time to behave compassionately. If you have an opportunity to take a hardline approach or a more generous approach, take the more generous approach. Safety is king, health and safety are king. So if that means that you operate very differently than the Municipal Act tells you to, and you say I was doing it out of a concern for safety in my community, that will go a long, long ways if you're ever scrutinized in the future. So let that be sort of your driving mandate when you are looking at making decisions about how you're going to operate remotely. So too with the delegation of authority bylaws. So to begin with, it needs to be a bylaw. The council cannot just say, oh, from now on, the CAO is going to do this, or the treasurer is going to do that. Authority needs to be properly delegated via bylaw. And the idea of delegation of authority bylaws, it's taken on a new light now, of course, as everything has in this COVID crisis, but the idea was to allow city council to run more smoothly, so that every minor license of occupation for a ball field wasn't coming to city council, gumming up the agenda and taking a lot of time. And that really is how they should be used, for minor and administrative matters. The bylaw has to be very explicit, and the traditional delegation of authority bylaws that we're all used to seeing have sort of a cover page saying council, pursuant to the Municipal Act, allows certain staff or certain positions within the organization to take on certain rules as described in the attachment. And then there'd be an attachment, and it would say the manager of recreation and culture has the authority to sign a license of occupation for all our city ball fields. And it actually goes through and delists the types of duties that different positions can exercise pursuant to that bylaw. What we're seeing now, or the scent we're getting now, is that municipalities, councils, and mayors want to just an omnibus delegation of authority bylaw that just cursorily mentions the Municipal Act and doesn't actually explicitly list what duties the staff are going to have. It's very important for staff to have that. It's actually I'm more concerned about municipal staff than I am about city council when it comes to delegation of authority, because right now in this period of crisis, we're all making decisions. We're making decisions very quickly, and some of them have lasting impact. Some of them have life-altering impacts in terms of employment or healthcare or whatever. So you need to know that those decisions will be looked at again in the future. There will be a scrutiny of them, and you need to do a good job. So for example, if you're making a decision as CAO, CAOs have the authority to hire and fire staff. That's one of their cornerstone obligations. But if you're making a decision about laying staff off, it is our very, very, very strong recommendation that you take that to your city council. It's something that's going to impact your community, the individuals that are laid off, and you don't want that decision solely on your shoulders. If there's pushback, and there will be, you want to be able to have the support of your council. So bring these things to council, even if you already have the authority. I would also say, so I think Mia might touch on it in her presentation, but about core services that the municipality provides, about garbage collection and about right now with the streets, if they're starting to do some infrastructure work, those kind of decisions about what's going ahead and what's not going ahead, even if you have that authority, we're really recommending you take it to council so that you'll have their blessing, literally and figuratively. So with the delegation of authority bylaw, we do like to see that list of actual duties and as explicitly as one can be. So for example, one administrative minor and frequent issue that comes up lots of times with municipalities would be, say, a license or a lease of city facilities. That's the kind of thing that you want city council not to be bothered with. So how do you do that? Well, the delegation bylaw will need to say licensing all of our sports and recreation fields falls to our recreation manager, and every license looks like this. And you actually present the license to council with a blank for who's going to be the tenant, how long, the term, and the fee associated. But they know the skeleton. So what they are delegating is, yes, I authorize you to enter into that agreement again and again with different parties. So it's very, very, very tight. And the tighter it can be, really the better. It's also important with delegations of authority bylaws to report back to your council. There's always embedded, or properly there ought to be embedded in your delegation of authority bylaw, a regular reporting scheme back to city council, so that be it annually or quarterly or whatever, you report back and say, yep, the licensing is going very well. We think we ought to increase the rent, or we're no longer interested in renting that particular facility because of concerns about whatever. But you should be reporting back regularly, and the bylaw should require it. It's also important because, as you know, and you're tired of hearing it, about transparency. It makes the actions of the municipality transparent. That way you don't get people coming back to city council or to particular councillors or to the mayor saying, well, you know what, the recreation manager always lets the field to her brother-in-law and she never lets it to anyone else, because those type of things are taken completely off the table if you have a regular reporting schedule. There's also concerns about the expenditure. So if you're spending more than is permitted in that year's budget, that should not happen ever. You should not exceed the budget. But if it does happen, the cure is to immediately get back to council as quickly as you can. And then I guess one of the things that we keep hearing again and again is, if you do something well outside the lines, so if you do not have a proper delegation of authority bylaw, or if you do, but you exceeded your authority, or a staff person did, the remedy is twofold. One, get back to council and report what happened. And two, please bear in mind that everyone right now is operating in a brand new way. And there will be a great deal of forgiveness if we have done things, particularly technical things, improperly, as long as the core values of the municipal act are met, which is serve the public, do it transparently, do it accountably. If those are sort of the guiding principles, you're not going to get into very much trouble. And I just want to see if I had anything else salient that I wanted to get back. I will say that we've seen an awful lot of delegation bylaws. We're happy to put our eyes on yours. If you have one, you'd like us to review it. If you don't have one and you want some help drafting, we're happy to do that. If you've drafted it and you want us to take a look at it, great. Any of those things would be really pleased to help you with, particularly at this time. And that's about all I have to say on it for today. I mean, we're trying to keep these presentations a little snappy, so you can get on with your day. And really, it was mostly to reach out to you. And thank you. I'll take questions now on delegation. And again, at the end, if there's any, please go ahead.
So Nuala, are you suggesting, and I'm going to ask a question just to be clear, do we still have to abide by the roles of council and the roles of staff in this time? You're talking about sort of doing our best. Does that mean that we have carte blanche?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Paul. You do not have carte blanche, and there are restrictions that have to be met, particularly if you are delegating to staff a quasi-judicial or a quasi-legislative role. So, and there are things that are completely prohibited. So, for example, anything that requires the passage of a bylaw. So, if you're changing the tax rate, the treasurer cannot do that. That needs to be done by way of bylaw. If you're removing somebody from office that has been properly appointed, that has to be done by bylaw. So those type of things I don't think you can exceed. But I would say, if it happens, and it may, you want to try and operate so that those things do not happen. But if it does happen, the cure is get back in front of council as quickly as you can, to have them remedy what you have done, or hopefully support what you have done, and be clear and transparent about it. I think that's just being real in today, because I mean, we're getting opportunities to do. We have the opportunity to do things very differently than we ever did before.
I guess to that point, if anybody has questions about what they should or shouldn't be doing, or they're about to make a decision, feel free to give us a call. Nuala mentioned the idea of layoffs and our opinion with respect to layoffs, while she says, and I agree, that the CAO has the authority to hire and fire, when you're laying off a large contingent of your workforce, or when you're changing the work schedule such that you have a lot of people working different hours, work sharing and sort of thing, that is affecting the level of service. And our advice is that that is a decision that should be made by council. And the reality of that decision is that somebody's not going to like it. And after COVID, when we're looking at what was done, that's when those decisions are going to be scrutinized. And so while I stand by my position that you've heard me say over and over again, that council ought not to get into operations, I think that's true. But where you're talking about the entire municipal operation, that becomes a level of service, and that becomes council's jurisdiction. So anything on that, Nuala?
Yeah, I would just reiterate again what MMAH said to us, which was really urge your councils to start cherry picking and prioritizing what really needs to be addressed at this time and what can be left. So, for example, I think somebody had a question concerning budgets. That's something right now that you probably need to be putting in the ears of council. That is a priority. Just try and get budgets approved, so you know what's coming, even if it's a partial budget, something to have in place. But maybe some of the zonings can wait. Maybe the idea about certain municipal projects, maybe those type of decisions can wait. If you could get council to prioritize, it's going to shorten the amount of time that they have to meet, and it is being cognizant of the direction that we're getting from every level of government.
No, I did have a question that came in on the chat, and I think you may have looked at this. And that is, in this era of COVID and trying not to work face-to-face and trying to get rid of paper, is there an option to sign documents electronically? And I know that question's been expanded as well to ask if there's a way to commission affidavits remotely. And I don't know if you've had a chance to research that yet, but do you have an answer on that?
Yeah, I do have an answer. And don't you find now that with COVID, all you want to do is touch your face? I think it's part of the virus. It's part of something in the air, and all I want to do now is scratch my nose. And I'll talk about commissioning affidavits because it's probably the strictest, but it flows down to anything else that you're signing. Commissioning affidavits, as you know, is part of the Commissioning of Affidavits Act, which sets out how, in fact, they are commissioned. And as you know, you want to confirm the identity of the person. You have to be in person with them to commission the affidavit, and then it is signed. However, those rules have been loosened given COVID-19. So you can commission affidavits remotely, electronically, by FaceTime, by Zoom like this. You just want to be really cautious about potential fraud. So I would not do it other than if you need to have a visual depiction of the person, of the deponent who's signing. It's better if you know them, of course, but oftentimes, especially as municipal staff, you do not know them. They're just coming in to, you know, for zoning or something of that nature, but it can be done remotely. You really need to be cognizant of their identity. So you want to see a couple of pieces of picture ID before you agree to it. You want to make sure that you don't have any concern in your head about capacity. So by that, I mean, if you think the person is under the influence of drugs or alcohol, if you have a sense that the person is being bullied or under duress into signing, then you don't want to participate in that at all. And then you want to find a way to have the actual physical document sent out to them thereafter. So it's sort of a follow-up. But it has been relaxed. Those type of rules where normally you'd need to have a witness standing right beside you, it's now been relaxed to allow for electronic signing and commissioning. Just for your own safety, make sure that you are very careful and keep careful notes that Paul Kassan called me at 10 a.m. and you know, he swore this affidavit, which I had read. I took 2 pieces of ID. They were this and this. So you have those kind of follow-up notes going forward.
And then with respect to electronic signing, the question was how can you do that? And I know that our real estate department has to have signatures, and I'm happy to say that the real estate market is still moving along, and you can get online programs like DocuSign, which allows you to sign electronically, and it has various security measures to identify and secure the signature. So DocuSign is a program that we are aware of. We're not affiliated with it. It's just one that we use. There's probably others out there, but that answers that question. And then Vicky has asked a question on the same kind of issue, and it's with respect to having Mennonites affirm affidavits. Yeah. Mila, any thoughts on that?
Procedurally, I think it would follow the exact same way, and I don't know why they couldn't affirm. Absolutely, I would follow the same protocol if you're doing those electronic, taking those cautions for the electronic signature, but they could certainly affirm. Yeah.
My prediction is that they probably don't want to do it electronically. So, you know, in the COVID crisis, if your office is closed and you're not having face-to-face activity, you may not be able to do. You may have to have some other sort of protocol where somehow you sanitize the document. We can help you on that, Vicky. If you want to send us an email going forward, we should discuss that, and maybe we can bring that back to one of our next webinars. Nola, I'm going to jump in now to Occupational Health and Safety Act, because I know that we were trying to get this done in about an hour. So what I want folks to understand with respect to the Occupational Health and Safety Act is that it is still in force. And not only is it still in force, but it's actually a priority piece of legislation. And what I mean by that is it has language in it that says if it conflicts with other pieces of legislation, which in fact includes orders under the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act, the Occupational Health and Safety Act trumps. And so we have to remember that we are employers. And even though there are orders made under the EMCP, they do not trump the Occupational Health and Safety Act. And so keep in mind in this circumstance, that as employers, we're obligated under section 25(2)H, and this is the section the ministry uses to charge when there's a problem, to take every precaution reasonable in the circumstances for the protection of a worker. And so what that means is that we have to be paying attention to COVID. We have to be setting up systems to protect our frontline workers, well, all of our workers, from the virus. And that's a mandated obligation. Now, interestingly, I've had a number of municipalities who've asked questions about people who want to continue to come to work, even though they may be exhibiting symptoms. And so I want to remind you as employers that workers also have a corresponding duty. And so that's in section 28 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, but it mandates that a worker shall report to his or her employer or supervisor any contravention of the act or the existence of any hazard of which he or she knows. What that means is that they have an obligation to tell you if they are suffering from COVID, if they've been exposed to COVID, so that you can protect the rest of your workplace. Additionally, workers have another positive duty, which is that they must work in a manner, it says no worker shall work in a manner that may endanger himself, herself, or any other worker. So the ministry is going to be looking at people who are perhaps symptomatic, and they have an obligation to self-report, and then you have an obligation to ensure that they're not going to affect your workplace. So additionally, with respect to Occupational Health and Safety Act, the work refusal process is still in place right now. And what that means is that workers can refuse to do work if they have reason to believe that it's likely to endanger themselves. And so if a worker thinks that one of their coworkers is suffering, or that their job is going to put them at risk and you don't have proper protection in place, they can refuse to work. One of the things to keep in mind is if you're a unionized workforce, that's going to engage your collective agreement and your joint health and safety committee. If you're not unionized, you have to examine the workplace and document it. If they still continue, then there's a call that needs to be made to the ministry, and the ministry is continuing to send inspectors and investigators out to assist with work refusals right now during COVID. So just be aware of that. Make sure that you follow the work refusal process, and know that the ministry is still there to assist you through that. Now, one of the things that I would suggest is that the most important thing right now is to communicate with your workers. This is a scary time. It's an interesting situation, and people are certainly suffering from the stress here. And that's normal. That's a response you should expect. So it's critical to communicate with your workers, listen to what they have to say about their concerns about the virus, help them get educated about how to protect themselves. Some people are reluctant to go to staggered work schedules, work sharing, but back to the employer's obligation to take every precaution reasonable. One of the requirements is that you ensure distancing. So I've seen municipalities that have typically had people working together in a truck, make arrangements to assign individual pieces of equipment to people so that they don't share a vehicle. I've seen a situation where a municipality has said, okay, because we don't have enough vehicles, you drive your own personal vehicle to the work site and we'll pay your mileage. I would urge you to talk to your insurer if you're going to do that, to ensure that there are no insurance issues, and I'm sure there won't be, but alert your insurer to that. And so I think that it's important to remember those obligations and to be conscious of them, and to communicate with your workforce. You're still the employer, you still set the rules, and so even when your employees say, well, we don't really want to do a changed schedule, or we don't really want to do a layoff, you have the positive obligation to protect them. And if you're doing that, then you can make that decision. And that's, again, something that you might want council's assistance with. So we've had a couple of questions as I've been talking. One person has asked, has indicated that PPE is almost impossible to secure. And what do we do about that? Well, that is a reality. And if you don't have PPE, then you have to do other methods to to ensure safety. So that's where we get into social distancing. It's where we get into prohibiting people from coming into the workplace. I can tell you in our office that most of us are working entirely remotely, with a very strict schedule about when people can go into the office if they need to avoid contact. So that's the way to deal with the lack of PPE. And the other thing to do with respect to getting it is to talk to your NPP and talk to the Ministry of Health and let them know what it is that you need and see if they can help you. Okay, so then there's another one. An interesting question. The province has advised that people over 70 self-isolate, and that somebody has received advice that it's not enforceable for employees over the age of 70, and an employee wishes to remain working. So that's an interesting issue. And I guess I think, Tim, I'm going to leave that one for you, because I think it goes to part of the provincial order. So if we don't get to that question, please ask it again, because Tim's going to speak on that. So another question is, we have people working at the office, handling taxes through cash or checks being left in the mailbox at the door. The provincial government has permitted a deferral of your education tax so that you can defer municipal taxes. So I think it is open to the municipality to say that we're not prepared to take taxes like that right now. Alternatively, I know that financial institutions are setting up systems where they'll take cash, but they don't have to touch it. So people could perhaps pay their taxes at their financial institution. And so that's what I've got to say on that. So I'm going to now hand the floor over to Mia, who's going to talk about electronic participation in council meetings, which has been a hot topic for sure.
Mute me there. I think I'll echo what both Paul and Nuala have said, how happy we are to have everybody here today. So I'm going to talk to you about electronic participation for council meetings. So on March 19th, Bill 187, being the Municipal Emergency Act, was passed to amend the Municipal Act such that municipalities could provide in their procedure bylaw to permit councillors to participate electronically in both open and closed meetings, and for those councillors to be counted when determining quorum. And this would be specific to the emergency situation that's happening now. So this can be found in section 3.3 of the Municipal Emergency Act. So having electronic meetings during this crisis allows council to still make timely decisions while adhering to the order, which Tim will talk about later, of no public assembly of more than 5 people. And it also allows adequate, proper, and safe social distancing without having staff and council in the same room. So Bill 187 also provides that municipalities can hold a special meeting to amend a procedure bylaw to allow for electronic participation during an emergency. So this meeting can be held electronically, and any member participating can count towards quorum. So with respect to electronic meetings and where they can be held, council can hold meetings in any convenient location within or outside the municipality. So during the period of an emergency, council can hold meetings that are open to the public by live streaming those meetings on a platform that's available to most members of the public. In the event that internet services do not exist, then meetings can be held by teleconference. So when meetings are held electronically or again by teleconference or web platform, it's important that the public is aware of how to participate in that meeting. So the web link, phone number, other electronic connection data to access these meetings should be published on the municipality's website. And in the event that the municipality's website is not available, or you're unable to post those details on there, then notice should be provided in a manner that's going to get to the largest number of ratepayers. So that might be on the local news website or another platform that you have. So open sessions will have to be recorded and then will have to be placed on the municipality's website as soon as possible. So with respect to electronic meetings, there are a few helpful things that you can do before the meeting, during the meeting, and after the meeting. So I'll go over those now. So before the meeting, it's important that the system that you're using is tested to work out any bugs that may exist. And it's important to have a plan B in the event that technology fails and you have to participate in a meeting in another way. So if the video feed fails or what have you, then you may have to switch to teleconferencing. So I think that everybody has to be prepared for something like that to happen. Making sure all participants have the coordinates to the electronic meeting, which I spoke about before. Allow for public participation remotely. Ensure that the public is aware that the meeting is being held electronically by placing notice on the municipal website, local newspapers, things like that. If a participant knows that they're going to be late for a meeting, then they should let the clerk know as soon as possible. And if possible, it's important to provide training on the system beforehand, on that system that you'll be using. So, I mean, you might be using Zoom or another meeting platform. People should know how to use that. So I've read that some places are, providing a little how-to sheet beforehand that everybody will have with them, especially if you're not comfortable with technology or whatever it may be, you'll always have that little cheat sheet beside you on how to use the program. And if possible, IT has been an area of employment right now that has been very, very helpful to all of us, since a lot of us are working remotely. So if possible, to have an IT staff person available during this time and when you're holding electronic meetings and when you're preparing to, that would be very beneficial. So a few things to remember during the meeting. This is a municipal meeting still, so it's to conduct municipal business and try to limit distractions, urging participants to resist the desire to check other devices, to check their emails, to check their cell phones, and things like that, because we're in a new setting that we have to get used to. So it is sometimes tempting to, look at another screen or look at your cell phone. It's important to be clear when participating electronically. Introduce yourself when you join the electronic meeting, because there are going to be a lot of participants, and it's easy for a lot of people to be talking at once and things like that. So speak clear, speak slow, and make sure to introduce yourself. Like we're doing here, we're muting participants to help with outside noise and things like that. That's also something important to remember when having electronic meetings. So after the meeting, where possible, allow for a meeting to be live streamed so that the public can participate. So if not possible, of course, like we said before, make the footage of the meeting as widely available as possible, such as the municipal website or your local news source. I know here, Sue Today will post the live stream of council meetings on Sue Today as it's happening, and then of course you have the ability to access that after, as well as the ability to access it on the municipal website. Allow for bylaws, resolutions, motions, and business like that to be signed electronically, and ensure that the footage of the meetings is stored safely. So that's what I can offer for how to prepare for electronic meetings before the electronic meeting happens, during the meeting, and after. So I do see a few questions here. The first one being, knowing that not all residents have internet availability, do we still satisfy the obligation of an open meeting? I would say yes, because you are making, to the best of your ability, you are making this meeting accessible to the public. There are other means of watching it. If you live stream it if you make it accessible on TV, I know that Rogers and Shaw will put this on live TV, so that might be another option as well, to make sure that those who don't have internet are able to still watch it. I don't know, Paul, Nuala, Tim, if you have anything else to add to that.
So what I would say is that in working with the Ombudsman about this, there have been two relevant decisions. One, a council chamber was not open to the public, but the council meeting was live broadcast on the internet, and the closed meeting investigator found that that was an open meeting that was accessible to the public. So we do have an authority to that. What's of concern is that there was a similar situation in 2015 where council meeting was not open, not accessible to the public. In other words, the chamber was closed. The meeting was recorded and then was posted on the municipal website. And the Ombudsman in 2015 ruled that that was not a proper open meeting. So there is one dangerous decision out there. And so our advice is that you do more than just record and post the meeting after it happened. And so, as Mia said, if you can't do online with the internet, you can use a Bell conference line, and you can publicize the conference call number and allow people to participate that way. The key is doing what's reasonable in the circumstances and available to you to allow people to participate. On this line, there's been a question asked, do meetings have to be recorded and posted? They don't. That's not a requirement under either the Municipal Act or the Municipal Emergency 2020 Act. But our advice is that that would be a best practice. And you can do that by having the clerk record the the telephone conference call on their cell phone and post it online that way, or use a digital voice recorder. It won't be the best recording, but it will be a recording, and it will be a strong effort to say that you've complied. And as Nuala was saying in her piece, I think that the Ombudsman's office and the courts, in case somebody takes a run at a decision that you've made this way, I think are going to be slightly lenient. And if you get into a situation, please give us a call, because I have other strategies up my sleeve that I don't really want to tell everybody about. So other questions, Mia, you can answer this one. Does the bylaw amendment to allow electronic meetings have to be conducted in a special meeting, or can it be the first thing at a regular meeting?
So the amendment to the Municipal Act provides that this be done in a special meeting, and that could be done electronically. And like I said before, everybody attending can attend electronically and can be held for quorum. So the Bill 187 did speak to it being done in a special meeting. So I would say that it'd be done in a special meeting.
And there's no restriction on when that meeting happens. And so my my advice to clerks who are designing agendas on this is to have the special meeting immediately before the next meeting. It is critically important that you have the special meeting and put the bylaw in place before you have an electronic meeting, as an example. So you just have a special meeting, you open the special meeting, you pass the bylaw, you close the special meeting, and you open the subsequent meeting. So there is a question about lack of security protocols on Zoom meetings. That is something that that has been discussed recently. There was a patch that was put in by Zoom last night to correct the security breaches, and so I think that it's reasonably secure. Certainly, there's no problem with having public meetings by Zoom, and I think that it's secure enough in the circumstances to have closed session meetings. I think that we need to continue to monitor that, and Tim may have some comments on that later on. Okay, because of the time, I'm going to try to hand this over to Tim to talk to us about the order with no more than 5 meetings with no more than 5 people.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and thanks everyone. Nice to see you all. I'll probably be briefer than everybody has so far, because there's some really good points that I want to make about the emergency order that's come out, but it's not a long order. It's an order that replaces, well, you probably remember there was a previous order of the same under the same regulation number 52/20, which the government had put in place with respect to gatherings of 50 people or more. What happened on March 28th, the government turned around and said, you know what, the situation's getting worse. We're going to now limit that to 5 people, subject to some important exceptions. So what it does, and I've actually got a copy of it sitting to my right here, and I want to actually go through the language with you quickly. So and you can find, just so everybody knows as well, the emergency orders, and actually all orders made under that the government will be making during this time of emergency, are going to be posted. Many of you have probably already been on the site, but the Ontario government website, if you Google the Emergency Management and Civil Procedure Act, and you go to the ontario.ca link that will come up to that act, you can see the orders are actually under the regulations tab at the top of that. So you can find the orders, all the orders that the government has made there. Often there'll be a news release about it, and unfortunately the government doesn't always post the direct link, so you have to do a little bit of searching. But that's how to find these anyways. So what this order does is it essentially, I'll run through the prohibition. So the prohibition is actually on a person not to attend. So no person shall attend an organized public event of more than 5 people, a social gathering of more than 5 people, or a gathering of more than 5 people for the purposes of conducting religious services, rites, or ceremonies. This applies, that prohibition, those three prohibitions that I just read to you, those all apply even if those events are held at a private dwelling. So even if you're thinking, or somebody's thinking, I'm a very religious person, I will have people to my home to conduct a service with perhaps my pastor or whoever, that still applies. So again, it's on the person. The prohibition is not so much on the organizer, it's about the person not attending. So anybody who attends that event would be potentially guilty of violating that order. So the carve-outs to that, however, are the gatherings of members of a single household. So obviously, if you're a household of above 5 people, you have a number of children or aging parents living with you, etc. That is carved out. A gathering for the purposes of a funeral that is attended by not more than 10 persons, as well as a carve-out. So funerals, attendance can go up to 10 people, and people can attend those, but any funeral service larger than that, attendance is prohibited. People are prohibited from attending. So one of the things that affects municipalities with respect to this order is, and we've looked at this fairly in depth, is the order doesn't say what an organized public event is. It says it has a comma after that says including a parade. So what that does essentially is, we know that enlarges the general meaning of whatever the meaning of organized public event is. We know it's enlarged to include events of the same class as parades. So fairs, things you can think of events that would be similar, if not synonymous, to parade type events. That doesn't mean that the meaning is restricted, though, only to those type of events. It just means it's enlarged to include them. So what organized public event in its ordinary, what we would look at is what's the ordinary meaning of that? And really the ordinary meaning is exactly what we'd expect any organized public event. And so the question becomes, what about a council meeting? Is a council meeting an organized public event? And we think the answer is yes, it is an organized public event. And that creates certain difficulties because, of course, many municipalities have council. When you include council and necessary staff, that will take the meeting size over the 5-person threshold, even if the public is not attending. What we've looked at, though, as well, is this concept that what this order is aimed at doing, and what I want everybody to remember is this order is aimed at curbing the spread of COVID-19. And so it doesn't specify what type of attendance is prohibited, but we think it's reasonable to assume, based on the purpose of the act, that and the electronic meetings permission that the government's made available, that Mia spoke about, that we're not talking about electronic attendance at these type of events, organized public events, social gatherings, etc. So electronic participation, we're saying, even though it's not specifically set out, we think that's in keeping with the spirit of the act. So again, it dovetails with what Mia was saying. Still conduct meetings electronically. This could basically be essentially a very difficult issue, though. If you haven't yet passed your amendment to your procedural bylaw, you'll want to do that as Paul set out, because it could create a really difficult situation for many municipalities that haven't done that and have meetings coming up, because obviously the people themselves are prohibited from attending. So it's a very individualistic prohibition. It's the people who are attending who are violating the act, and you don't want to be encouraging people to do that. So I wanted to just check if there's I don't have a huge amount more to say on that, except one of the things that you'll notice as well is that the government is serious about this order, and why I'm saying that is because you look at what they're really doing with it, and they've even gone so far as to say we believe they've infringed the charter, even potentially, with the restriction on religious rights and services. And so generally speaking, governments don't, the government stays away from religion, and that is a charter protected right. We don't know if there'll be any challenges in that respect, but we certainly realize that the government is serious about this, with the fact that they decided to make the prohibition apply to religious services and ceremonies, the 5-person or more prohibition. And so we very much believe the government is serious about this, and that in terms of council meetings, it's really an added push towards doing the need to do those electronically and get set up properly in order to do that. So that's actually all I have specifically. I know Paul had a question that had come in earlier, and about elderly people self-isolating, and maybe I'll ask Paul to reiterate that so I can come back to it and address it.
So Tim, the question is essentially the public health officials have said that people over 70 and people who are compromised by underlying medical conditions should self-isolate. And what does an employer do when they have an employee who is in that category but wants to continue to come to work?
And so this sounds to me, Paul, and I have not looked at this other than to think about it right now. So I'm hesitant to say too much, except I understand this is guidance. It's not. It doesn't sound like it's a mandatory requirement. I haven't seen it in an actual order, and so it may be that elderly people are being directed to self-isolate. That doesn't mean necessarily that they cannot come into work. Obviously, the employer has, as employers, we have a requirement to maintain a safe work environment for everyone. And so I think making those aware of the guidance from the government to self-isolate those people who meet that criteria, and making accommodation for them to be able to do so. Again, whether that means working remotely or however that accommodation would take place, I would encourage you to do it and have that conversation and make sure that they're aware of that, so that they can make an informed decision about whether they should self-isolate. And we should pay attention to make sure that guidance does not turn into something that's mandatory for those individuals to do, or for employers to do as part of their requirement to maintain a safe workplace. Of course, if those people are presenting symptoms, Paul spoke about how to address that. But right now, I would say make them aware. Awareness is key. Let them make an informed decision and be prepared to assist them in addressing those guidelines however they believe they should.
Okay, so another question is, what do we recommend the best way to distribute information to council for a closed meeting? This is an interesting issue, and I understand, I think it's iCompass has an ability to have electronic closed session packages that are secure. That's going to really depend on what your equipment and software can do. Certainly, if you're having people come to the office, you need to practice social distancing. If they can come and look at closed session packages in advance, you need to practice that. You need to make sure you don't have more than 5 people coming in to do that at a time. And maybe we can, as we sort of learn through this, we can have some further advice and experience on how to do that. I don't know if anybody else has comments on that, Nuala or Tim or Mia. Okay. There's a couple of questions about teleconferencing as a council meeting and how to control that and make sure that that your closed session, if you're using it by telephone conference, is secure. And as far as I can tell, the only way to do that is to have 2 separate conference call lines. So one for your open meetings that you circulate the number to the public, and one for your closed meetings that you do not share to the public, because when you're on a conference call, you can't tell who's on the line. Additionally, as Mia indicated, the best practices would be certainly for the head of council to be very strong, running the meeting, to have councillors identify themselves who is speaking, so that there's a clear record of that. And it's important as well to keep in mind, we spoke about public participation, and the Ombudsman's got a really good publication about open meetings, and make it clear that the public has a right to watch or view open meetings. They don't have a right to participate in them by asking questions. And so what many municipalities are doing at this point is they're saying, if people want to make a delegation to council or a presentation to council, that should be done in writing or by providing an electronic file. And I think that's a good idea. Other questions?
While Paul's looking at the other questions, and I know we're going over our time, I just wanted to let everybody know, I think we had a comment about cybersecurity, security measures with Zoom in particular, but remember as well, and perhaps this will even be the subject of, and I don't know, but possibly a subject of another WMG session, or of course questions in the interim, but just remember, guys, that with working remotely, people are, and it could be council members as well, even if you're using a secure platform for meetings, etc., cybersecurity is really only as good as its weakest link. And if people are using their own laptops and they're having files that are sensitive on those, their security may not be up to par with what is expected. Their home networks as well may not be secure. They may be using other media on their computer that or other apps, etc., that may not be secure. And so we can certainly help you with that. I'm sure many have acceptable use policies, bring your own device policies, and that those probably include security requirements. But I just wanted to bring that up, that cybersecurity is as good as its weakest link, and just because you're using a secure platform doesn't necessarily protect you. There is cybersecurity insurance that you can purchase, and again, it's that's something to consider while employees are working remotely during this time. But I leave that because we're going over, but I just wanted to let everybody know.
All right, well, thanks very much to everybody here. I know we didn't get to all of the questions. I'm going to save the chat, and we will be addressing the questions that we didn't get to at future webinars. I'm going to put up our contact information now, so everybody who doesn't have it already can get it. Please feel free to reach out to us. I see that we've given our office number, even though we're not there, so best to use our emails. And if you send us an email, certainly on our signature lines, you'll find our cell phone numbers. If anybody wants to take a note, my cell phone number is 705-542-4747, and we're happy to help out. Okay. Thanks very much, everyone. I really appreciate you coming, and we'll do this again. Have a good day and stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.